Today, I'm excited to welcome Jane Young. She is an animal communicator and is here today to talk about a very unique opportunity to deepen your relationship with your pets. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Jane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Anne.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome. So tell me, prior to meeting you, I'd never heard about this particular profession. How did you get here? How did you find animal communication and how did it all start for you?
Well, interestingly, I read an article in a magazine about an animal communicator and teacher named Penelope Smith. And she came to the profession through being, well, she had been a social worker, I think, but she had been working with people doing counseling. And she was, a lifelong intuitive and discovered that she could use some of the same skills that she used in counseling with people with animals and get results. And
Mhm.
so she just kept on doing that. And she wrote books and she started teaching people. And she was the first person that I know of who really started saying out loud, like, actually, this is a real thing. And this is something that we can do, that it's something that's part of our nature, that we're born with, that we're socialized out of when we're little, and that we can reclaim, and that it's actually a skill that you can learn. And that was very inspiring to me. And after that, I took a few classes with other animal communicators, some of whom who had studied with Penelope. I worked with a woman named Carol Gurney, who is also a pretty famous animal communicator. And eventually I found my way back to Penelope and trained with her for a couple of years. And and that was it. This was in 2001, 2002, and I had sort of found a calling and found that it was something that I just really love doing. Um, yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So tell me, traditional dog trainers, if you will, use uh, body language cues to help humans work with their dogs. How is what you do different, if you will, than what a traditional dog trainer might
Very
offer?
different, very different. In fact, sometimes I have found that actually seeing the animal or being in the animal's presence can be, at least when I was starting, it could be a little, make it a little more difficult, because what I do is actually called telepathy, or using your intuition, or telepathy actually means feeling across a distance.
Mhm.
So when I work with animals, most of my work is done over the phone. A lot of my clients who I've had, I have some clients that I've had for over a decade, and I've never
Mhm.
actually seen their animals. Some of them will send me
Interesting.
pictures after the fact, but for the most part, I don't. I'm starting to do more Zoom sessions because people like that, and I'm comfortable with it, and I'm fine with it. But it's the communication is really a heart-to-heart communication, very different than looking at body language or sort of behavioral stuff. It's
Mhm.
more about what the animal is feeling, thinking, and experiencing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're sensing that because I think as human beings we're always wondering so much about our animals. Talk a little bit about how what you do strengthens has the possibility to strengthen the bond between animal and their owner.
Well, what I find to be one of the most rewarding parts of my work is when people realize that this is something that they can do themselves.
Mhm.
And when they realize that, that all the feelings they had had, or the hunches or the assumptions about their animals, or not all, but maybe some, are confirmed when they have a meeting with me. And I'll say, well, I'm I'm trying to think of an example, but one isn't coming to me. But when I'm able to confirm for them what their gut feelings are about what their animals loves and not loves are, it confirms for them that they actually have been communicating with their animal on a heart-to-heart level. And it can be a real awakening for people to realize that if this is actually possible, if what they're feeling underneath is something that can actually be confirmed, and that the animal's outward behavior then can shift and change, and they notice a relationship shift or a deepening, um, I feel like that I've done my job there too, because I really feel like what I do is to help people recognize that the bond they have with their animal is something, very sacred and very special. That our companion animals show up for us in ways that are so deep and so loving. And I mean, you have dogs, right?
Mhm.
That that when that's confirmed that no, actually, your little dog actually really does feel that way about you,
Mhm.
um, that can be life-changing for people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of what you're saying. I mean, that bond, I've had a couple of dogs, a few dogs in my adult life, and all of those relationships I will say have been different. But, the relationship I have with I have two dogs now, and my relationship with each of them is different. And those two relationships are different than, the relationships I had with dogs in the past. So it's been real interesting to see that ebb and flow and that shift. It's
Yeah.
not the same, and I suppose it's similar. I don't have human kids, but I've heard parents talk about my relationship with my daughter is different than my son, or even if they have two, three daughters, their relationship with each one of those is very, very different. So it's been interesting to experience for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that you were very careful to point out in our conversation prior to recording this podcast was that your services that you offer do not replace traditional dog training and do not replace the need, perhaps, for veterinary care.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You talk a
Yeah.
little bit about
I'm not a
that.
trainer. I'm not a vet. I'm an animal communicator, and that has limitations, right? As far as training goes, I can help people sort of get their animal's perspective on things and really help them maybe to find the type of training that might work best for them. Or I can work with a trainer to sort of, if they're running up against obstacles with an animal, we can work together to kind of
Mhm.
figure out what can work best for that animal. Um, but that their work is very different than what I do. And also I think it's really important to know that dogs, horses, cats, all of our companion animals, they are not human. They're different than we
Mhm.
are. Um, they can love and have relationships like we do, but training is really important for them, because that allows them to live in the world with us.
Mhm.
Sort of just the way we bring up children, right? When we bring up our
Mhm.
children, we teach them certain things about living in a family, living in a community. It's the same thing with dogs,
Mhm.
horses, cats, companion animals all across the board, is that
Mhm.
we need to guide them and teach them how to be in relationship, and how to sort of manage the human world. And that's what training really, at its essence, is about.
Mhm.
And then there's more specialized things, like some people are really into doing athletic competitions with their animals, or say with horses, there's a really important connection between the horse and their rider. And so all of that, I can augment that and help people really strengthen the bond, is I think where my work impacts that. And as far as veterinary work, again, I'm not a vet, I'm not a replacement for veterinary services. That being said, I can help people um, with the animal's perspective
Mhm.
of, and sometimes I can pick up on things going on inside. It doesn't, like, the animal can't say to me usually, like, I have a tumor, in my intestine,
Mhm.
right? Because they don't know that. They just know that their belly hurts. Um, but what I can do sometimes is notice, like, ooh, there's some darkness there, there's something there, and you
Mhm.
really should take your animal to the vet.
Mhm.
And oftentimes those things check out and there's something going on there.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a really important thing to be very clear about with my clients, that I am not a replacement for veterinary care, and that they do need to have a vet
Mhm.
that they have a relationship with. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm just sort of thinking back quickly, I don't think I've ever had a client who doesn't have a relationship with a vet,
Mhm.
who doesn't believe in veterinary care or something, because it's very unlikely that somebody who's not really caring for their animal really well is going to call an animal communicator.
Fair point. Yeah.
It just hasn't, I'm sure it happens, but it hasn't happened with me.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think it's an important thing that you highlight because the message I imagine that you don't want to send is, oh, this will be perhaps a less expensive avenue for
Oh,
other
right.
services that might be necessary, especially, now where, people are a little bit more aware about what things cost. So,
Yeah.
they still need to keep those relationships and take your dog to the vet or a cat to the vet if you think something's wrong. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that Penelope Smith, who I mentioned earlier, has provided to the animal communication community is a really comprehensive code of ethics that I have on my website, that have signed off on, and it's very clear about what our role is and what our role is not. Like, one of the
mhm,
things is that, say, if you called me up and said, my neighbor's dog is barking all the time, I need you to check in with them and see what's going on. I can't do that.
mhm,
That's unethical. It's unethical for me to go and, it would be like if I came and, picked up somebody's child at the bus stop and started having
mhm.
a conversation with them. It's just not, it's a boundary. It's not what we do.
Right, right, right. Now talk a little bit about the types of animals that you work with. I believe you had mentioned in our last conversation that you not only work with, dare I say, domestic animals, cats, dogs, guinea pigs, that kind of thing, but you also go out to barns and
Yeah.
do, barn
Yep.
visits and things like that. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, when I first started, I was really involved with horses, and I owned my own. Actually, I didn't own them. Nobody owns animals, but I had my own horse companions, and I part of my training of myself was to travel around to different barns, and I just volunteered my services. And these were people who I didn't know. It was sort of word of mouth. It's like, oh, you should go to this place. And I'd call them up and say, can I come visit? This is what I
Mhm,
do. And everybody was like, oh, yeah, come on over. And I deepened my skills that way. And
mhm,
also found that I also deepened my confidence. Because one of the things that I think that, at least for me, was a real turning point was when I started realizing that the information I was getting was not only accurate, but that the animals people were starting to see real change in their animals. And so I sort of naturally fit in with the horse world. And that's where I got my start. But all animals who have a relationship with us are interested in communicating with us, whether that's a horse or a goat or a sheep or a cat or a dog or a rat. Wild animals who don't live with us, we can also communicate with nature.
mhm,
It's a little different, sometimes they're just not as they're not companions. They're not like it's like our companion animals are knocking on the door all the time and saying,
mhm,
"Hey, hello, I'm here. Are you listening to me?" Where animals who live in the wild, they have their own communities. They have their own history. They have their own
Hmm.
stories. And we're not necessarily beings that they want to have relationships with.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, at the same time, it's it's not different, really.
Hmm.
It's really this heart-to-heart connection with another being, or with a tree, or with a rock, or I think I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I've had a lot of really interesting experiences working with bees and ants in particular.
Hmm.
Especially ants. I have found that ants are amazingly cooperative. In fact, we've lived in this house, we're renting here and we've lived here since the spring, and we had an influx of ants in June. And I always make deals with the ants, and I let them know that they're not, if they come around in the kitchen and they're in the sink and stuff, it's not a safe place for them, and that I will make sure that there's food for them outside. And so I make sure that I drop crumbs and things. And I haven't seen an ant in here for months. We don't use food
Interesting.
poison. We don't, nothing like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really interesting how cooperative they're like obviously cooperative. Ants, at least in my experience, have been,
Yeah.
and also bees. And it may be just that these are animals who live in community and really
Hmm.
um, are maybe more open to communicate. I don't really know.
Yeah.
It's very,
And I guess bees isn't really all that surprising to me in your line of work because there are local beekeepers here that are have bees on their property that they're caring for, and they harvest honey and things like that. But ants, I guess I wouldn't have gotten there, but it does make sense because
yeah,
you're right, they live in these massive colonies.
yeah. Yeah,
So
years and years and years ago, it was probably even before I really dove into animal communication. I went to it was an author presentation. Somebody had written a book about bees, or no, maybe they had done work in Africa with bees or something. But and they had this slideshow, and they were talking about the bees, and there were all these old elderly men in the audience who were beekeepers, and just
mhm,
listening to them. These were people. There was a veterinarian. There was these were like scientists, people who were entomologists. And when I listened to them talking about the bees, it was so fascinating to hear them talking about the decision-making process, and oh yeah, the bees are deciding blah blah blah, and just sort of listening to the respect and the way that they honored the bees' intelligence was
mhm.
really fascinating to me. And these
Hmm.
were folks that in their day-to-day lives probably would say, I don't believe in animal communication, or
Right,
it's not
right.
something that's real. But when they were talking about their bees, it was very clear that they really respected and understood um, the communication that was happening.
Hmm. Now, have you ever worked with, I know you said you don't do a lot with wildlife, and it makes sense. But have you ever worked with animal rehabilitators? There are not many in here on the South Coast, but there are some, I see posts all the time. Hey, I found this injured bird. And,
Yeah.
do you ever get to partner
I
with
have not had
those?
the opportunity really to do that. I would love to, though. That sounds really interesting.
Hmm.
Um, that's just not something that I've sort of been led to. I'm very open to it, though. Um,
Yeah.
it's
I would be
interesting that animal
curious.
communicators often will um, find a path. Like there are some people who specialize in finding lost animals. And they can go
Okay.
into great detail. They'll have maps, they'll use dowsing, all kinds of really interesting tools. And with great accuracy, can find lost animals. Um, I do that a little bit, but it's not my specialty. And I usually
Hmm.
will refer people to somebody who really, that's what they, that's what they do. Because when
Hmm.
somebody's lost an animal, they're in a really emotionally distressing moment. And I think it's really important that they have an expert who that's what they do.
Yeah.
who's very clear that they have a track record of success, and that that person can trust that they're going to, hopefully find their animal. That's I just don't have enough experience with that. I just haven't.
Yeah.
It just hasn't shown up enough for me to really go that route. Um, I think that my sort of specialty is more about the relationship, more about, and that makes a lot of sense because I'm a mental health counselor. That's my
Right.
that's
Right.
where I go. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's I admire your candor about this is my lane,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to refer you to, if you need something more or something different, I'm happy to help you find that. Um, but I might not be the person to reach out to for this set of circumstances.
Yeah.
I think that's great because a lot of people, tend to practice a variety of different things and then just think that they're great at all of it. And this, to your point, there's so many facets of almost any profession. So,
Yeah. Well, I learned early on that one of the qualities that I look for when I'm looking for a healer or a practitioner of any kind, really, is humility.
mhm,
That if somebody is, advertising themselves as, you know, the only one who has this knowledge, or has branded themselves as somebody who discovered something or made something
mhm,
up, I tend to have a lot of skepticism, just because a lot of the work that we do has been has been around for generations and generations and generations.
mhm,
And I think it's really important to honor um, those who came before us and
mhm,
inspired us. And that's why, like when I speak to you or to other people, I always acknowledge my teacher, Penelope, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her.
mhm,
And, my work is not the same as hers. I've evolved into my own person,
mhm,
um, but I didn't get here alone.
mhm, mhm. How does an animal communicator, um, I mean, aside from experience working with animals, how do you refine your skills over? Because I imagine this world is, there's always lessons to be gleaned as people in your circle get more experience in different experiences. Are there workshops that you attend relatively, regularly to sort of, hone your skills or just, learn different techniques or what does that ongoing education look like
Yeah,
for?
that's really interesting. So I think that first of all, to understand that at the heart of animal communication is intuition.
Mhm,
So anything that you do that allows you to recognize what intuition is and what it isn't. And for me, that was learning how I receive information. And when I first started, I would sort of hear a voice in my head. It was almost like a
hmm,
conversational voice, sounded like my own voice. And this is what I did when I was in those horse barns, was I was figuring out what was coming from the animal and what I was making up in my
got it.
own mind. And so I would just tell the person, I would say, I'm getting this image, or hearing this, that your horse is like, likes to eat popcorn or whatever that is. And I
Mhm,
would just tell the person. And I learned very quickly that it's very important to just stay with what you're receiving and not embellish it.
mhm,
Not say, oh, your horse likes popcorn. Maybe that's because, right? Or I think that's because, right? To really stay with just the information that you're getting, and
mhm,
to notice and learn how you're getting it.
mhm,
Because there are lots of different ways that we experience our intuition. There's clairaudience, which means clear hearing,
Hmm.
clairsentience, which means clear feeling, clairvoyance, clear seeing. So there, and there's several others, but I feel like as we become more and more skilled as animal communicators, we get to have more of a sense of clairsentience, of a feeling of like
Hmm.
really knowing what it is that is going on with that animal. And a lot of that is nonverbal. And 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 my job as an animal communicator is translating that very quickly into words so
Hmm.
that the
Hmm.
client, the human, can understand that. And
And do you
sometimes it
find,
comes up
oh,
as like metaphor almost, or yeah.
yeah. Do you find that intuitive feeling, if you will, or intuitive experience um, changes with depending on the animal that you're communicating with, or do you find that your pattern is almost like the voice in your head, if you will? Like, do you find that you get like an intuitive voice, or do you get with horses, for example, but you might get more of a feeling with a dog? Do you find that there's a bit of a variation there, or is it pretty consistent for you?
For me, it's pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
consistent. I may respond differently to the animal. Like I may respond differently to, say, a kitten than to um, a very skilled dressage horse,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where with a kitten, it's going to be much more like I'm speaking to a little child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a very skilled high level dressage horse, it's going to be a much more like I'm speaking with a great being who really has had a lot of experience in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This has been so fascinating because this is the first time, when you and I met, I had never met an animal communicator. Um, Certainly now they seem to be popping up on
Yeah,
social media, but more, I would say, in the medium space,
yeah,
for animals that have crossed over. I seem to be noticing a little bit more of that, um, but not exactly, in
yeah,
the space that you're practicing in now. So
yeah.
this has been really interesting. And I think it opens up a very unique opportunity for people who just want to learn a little bit more about their pets or their barn animals or whom, whatever
Well, the other
sentient
thing
beings
that
they
I
have in
think
their life.
people really need to understand is that this is something they can do themselves.
Hmm.
This they can learn just like I learned. I am not some kind of special psychic lady. And I teach people. I actually teach Penelope's class that she
Oh, okay.
taught me. Um, I teach people how to do this, and
Hmm.
it's very rewarding to see how quickly once people sort of shed their fear and are able to step into this realization that there's this whole other way of being and seeing the world,
Hmm.
how that can influence them and how that can add to the richness of their lives.
Hmm.
It can
Hmm.
be really life-changing for people to learn how to do this. And
Hmm.
not everybody wants to,
Hmm.
but if you really want to and you're willing to put the work in, um, it can be very rewarding. Yeah.
It would be great to see you get into the rescue space.
Mm. Hmm.
Because I mean, it aligns somewhat with rehab depending on the situation, but
Yeah.
I think if sometimes those relationships, I'm sure, as you have experienced or know, they start out a little rocky because
Yeah.
the animal doesn't realize that, this person is actually there to help
Yeah.
them, and so
Yeah.
it can take a while for that relationship
Yeah.
to turn a corner.
Yeah, it does. It takes a while. I think I've told you I have a rescue dog, which I'd never really had a rescue dog in my life. But this one, she was born in Texas. She was born on the street, and We've had her now for about a year and a half.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the changes that are happening on a daily basis are amazing. You
Hmm.
know, when we first got her, she wouldn't walk on, dead leaves on the ground. We got her in December. So she couldn't walk really on uneven ground. She's
Hmm.
an urban dog. She was scared of a lot of things. She's still a little scared of things. I mean, she's small, so yeah. But now, I mean, yesterday she swam. She actually
Oh, wow.
swam through a current over her head without a leash on, all by herself. And that was just huge because, you know, that was not something that was in the cards that we thought would
Right,
ever happen.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how relationships change over time and how dogs open up over time.
Right.
Sometimes that time is less, sometimes it's a little bit longer, but it's great when you notice those little
Yeah.
subtle things. Especially because our time with, as you know, our time with animals is relatively short compared to our own lives. So I think the more that we can make those observations, the more happiness we can experience with our dogs. So or cats or horses or whatever animals you have in your
Yeah.
world. Um, so what I'd like to do now is what we call our rapid fire round. This is just an opportunity for folks to get to know a little bit about you outside of your animal communication skills. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you two choices, and whichever one speaks to you, that'll be the answer that you come back with. And my job is to tell you whether you're right or wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. Um,
Okay.
all right. So coffee or tea,
Coffee.
hummus or salsa.
Hummus.
Awesome. I have been known to eat hummus off a spoon. I'm
Yeah, I love it.
not proud of that, but I'm owning my nonsense for what it is. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Okay, okay, we're learning. Beach vacation or mountain getaway?
Beach vacation.
I agree with you. The warmer, the better. Fries or onion rings?
Fries.
Dogs or cats?
Oh God. At this point right now, I would say dogs.
Okay.
That's
Well,
really
you
hard.
own a dog, so that's a
Well, we have a cat too, but the cat is very male oriented and she loves my partner and she just doesn't have anything to do with me. So,
I mean, cats tend to be a little bit more independent. I
yeah.
realize there are exceptions, but and so last but certainly not least, comedy or drama?
Oh, I like them both. That's a very hard choice. I would say let's say drama.
Okay. Could you share with us the best piece of advice that you've received?
The best piece of advice that I've received is just go for it.
Mhm.
Just go for it. In my life, one of the things that has held me back is it takes me a really long time to make changes in my life.
Mhm.
I'll want to do something, and it'll take me a long time to actually go from the idea to the implementation.
Mhm.
And as I'm, now looking at phasing out of being a mental health counselor, I've done work with trauma survivors for decades. And
Mhm.
now I'm moving more into coaching and animal communication and teaching. It's taken me a long time to
Mhm.
make that leap. And I still have a small counseling practice. And part of my as I told you, I've been taking some time off, and part
Mhm.
of that is really getting clear with myself about what's next. And
Mhm.
I think, last winter I created a website. I'm sort of, it's like I'm inching towards it, but I'm not
Mhm.
I don't jump into things with both feet. And
Yeah.
that's something in my later years that I really would like to change about myself. I really would like
Hmm.
to just go for it.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like you're making progress. I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
you've built the website and you've taken these small steps, I think is just, um, that alone is to be applauded because let's just be honest. I mean, people, they want so badly to do, different things and they never do it. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, we've all heard the stories of, you know, people that are living out their last days and they're just filled with so much regret. And I
Yeah.
think that's so unfortunate. So, for you to even make these small amounts of progress, I think good for you because some people just never do anything. And then all of a sudden a
Yeah.
decade's gone by and they're still
Yeah.
swirling around about doing whatever. So
Yeah,
good for
and
you.
part of it with animal communication for me, which has been from way back in the beginning, is this idea of being judged. Of,
Hmm.
because in my professional world, and in some of my personal relationships, this is not something that people can accept.
Hmm.
That if you actually do this, that either you are not telling the truth,
Hmm.
or that you're a fraud, which is very awful for me to even consider that somebody might be feeling that way about me. Um,
Right.
or you are delusional in some way,
Hmm.
or that or that you're taking advantage of people in some way.
Right.
And that has been, those sort of perceived judgments are things
Hmm.
that I've struggled with for a
Yeah.
very long time. And that's something that I have needed to face, and also realize that I don't have any control over that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things is being okay with being misunderstood because naturally as human beings we're social creatures. Well, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And the last thing we want to experience is not being accepted.
Yeah.
We all want to be loved, we all want to belong, we all want to be part of something. And when someone uh y- you know feels a certain kind of way about you that makes you feel like you're just, not part of it, it can be very difficult to deal with. But you're right. But you're also absolutely right. You have zero control about what people say, do, or feel about you. I mean, that
Yeah.
you have no control over it. So, which then, eh, brings in this idea of be okay with being misunderstood,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, and
tough.
also this is my true nature. From the time that I was a little kid, I
Mhm.
remembered, speaking with animals and wanting, so it was sort of like this feeling that I was playing and I was pretending, and it was something I really wanted.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I told you Charlotte's Web is my favorite book.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, just I wanted to be Fern Arable.
Mhm. What a great childhood story. It
Yeah.
really is. In fact, you may have inspired me to go and read that again
Oh, read it
because I
again.
mean, I mean, it's been I cannot tell you the last time I have heard that story. So,
Yeah, it is. It's one of the best stories. Life and death and love and all of it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Disney they tried their hand at the movie, which I mean, wasn't horrible, but nothing beats the book.
No, the book is yeah, it's a treasure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before I don't want to wrap up without giving you an opportunity to tell people how to find you. Tell us about I don't know if you're on social media or your
I
website.
know
Go
I'm
tell us
really
all the
trying to stay
things.
away from social media and seeing if I can do this without it.
Good for you.
Because I just have, I don't want to get into it, but yeah, I don't, I'm trying to stay away from social media. But you can find me on my website. It's janeyoungcoaching.com.
Hmm.
And from there you can get into You can do a free consultation for 15 minutes where I can, I'm happy to speak with anybody about my work, what I do, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And then, or if you want, you can sign up directly for animal communication sessions through my website and schedule right there. And yeah,
That's great. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I have said
yeah,
that 1,000 times. I will probably say it 1,000 more. So I appreciate your want to try to do all things without social media. It's a
I'm
place
trying. Yeah,
for
I mean,
sure.
I have a feeling that I may, you know, I may end up being on social media, but for now, I'm really trying to make a go of it without it.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. So it is your website again is
It's
Jane Young.
janeyoungcoaching.com.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I also offer coaching services, particularly for people who maybe have experienced trauma in the past
Hmm.
and are, maybe they've done their therapy and now they're looking for something more, looking
Okay.
for maybe developing their intuition, or they're trying to start a business, or they're just needing some tools to and somebody to inspire and help them move into their lives and what's called the post-traumatic growth phase. That's
Hmm.
sort of where my coaching skills are focused right now. But
Hmm.
coaching is really about the present and the future, and not so much about healing the past. So
Hmm. Hmm.
if people are interested in doing coaching work with me, we can also incorporate animal communication in with that.
That's fantastic because I think a lot of people get stuck about where to go in the future, but for sure, if you are a trauma survivor, you probably feel even more stuck because for years and years, I imagine your identity has been caught up in whatever
Yeah.
happened. And so it can be difficult to create a new identity that will serve you in a much more productive and happy way in the future. So good, good for you for picking up that ball because again, I'm learning a lot today. This is the first I've heard of a coach or a practitioner that um, is willing to pick up that ball where counseling sessions have come to an end and healing and moving forward,
Right.
continuing that healing journey and moving forward and finding a great path forward begins. So
Yeah, and it can also be an adjunct to therapy. Say if somebody's going to a therapist and having their doing their trauma work with a therapist, they can also work with me on stuff
mhm,
that is not necessary, that's, adjunctive to
mhm,
their
mhm,
therapy. In a situation like that, I would want to have, a conversation with their therapist and have a team approach where we
mhm,
can make sure that that person's needs are getting met
mhm,
in whatever way, that sort of supports their treatment plan and therapy. So
mhm,
I can be a sort of an adjunct to their healing in a way that is a little different than what
mhm.
they're doing in
Yeah,
the.
and I imagine that would probably be lend a little bit more of a seamless transition versus my therapy sessions ended a month ago and now I'm a
Yeah,
little lost as to where to go. I imagine that if you start that, say, towards the end-ish, then you the transition's a little smoother.
yeah. Yeah, and what we've always said as therapists is that our job is to put ourselves out of business, right? What we
Hmm.
want is for people to heal and move on,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so I am offering my services as a place to move on to.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very fascinating conversation. I appreciate so much you sharing your part of your day with me, and I look forward to hearing more about your journey as you continue on in your work as an animal communicator.
Thank you very much, Anne. It's been a pleasure.